frustrated young man boarded a midnight bus out of Lagos hoping to escape his troubles. He had no idea where the road would lead. When the bus broke down in the middle of nowhere, he wandered into a glittering village lit by golden lanterns and marble streets. At first, it looked like paradise, until he noticed something terrifying. There were no men. Not one. Every face that turned toward him was a woman's, beautiful, elegant, but silent. What began as a search for peace soon pulled him into a deadly secret that had haunted the village of Odooma for generations. They thought he was just another lost traveler. Instead, he had walked into the center of an ancient curse where no man is ever meant to survive. This is the story of how one stranger stumbled into a village with only women, and how his arrival awakened the wrath of a goddess who had been waiting for him all along. But before we dive in, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's tale will be even darker than this one. The night air in Lagos was heavy, the kind of air that carried both the scent of wealth and the stench of despair. Towering skyscrapers gleamed with lights in Victoria Island, but beneath their glass facades were streets filled with honking cars, exhausted workers, and young men who had lost hope. Among them was Chike, a man in his late 20s whose dreams had been swallowed by the unforgiving city. He had once imagined himself a successful businessman, dressed in Italian suits, driving a sleek car through Ikoyi, admired by everyone. Instead, his days were filled with rejection letters, creditors knocking on his door, and the constant reminder that Lagos belonged only to the ruthless. Tonight, he could no longer bear it. With no destination in mind, Chike boarded a late-night bus leaving Ojota Park. The rickety vehicle was filled with weary passengers, some clutching cheap bags, others holding baskets of food. He sank into his seat, staring out of the window as the city lights blurred into the distance. He did not know where the bus was going. He only wanted to leave. Hours passed. The bus rumbled through unfamiliar roads, the moon shining above endless stretches of forest and farmland. Somewhere near midnight, the bus broke down. The driver cursed, opened the hood, and tried to fix it. Passengers muttered prayers or fell asleep on their seats. But Chike could not sit still. Something in the darkness outside called to him, a strange pull, like a whisper in his chest. Without telling anyone, he stepped off the bus and wandered down a narrow path that curved away from the main road. The night was silent, the trees tall and watching. He walked for what felt like hours until he saw a faint glow in the distance. Drawn to it, he followed until the path opened into a breathtaking sight. Before him stood a village unlike anything he had ever seen. Marble streets shimmered under golden lanterns, their light glowing as though the stars themselves had descended. Mansions rose on either side, their walls decorated with intricate carvings of flowers and women. The air smelled of jasmine and perfume, luxurious and intoxicating. Chike's heart pounded. This was no ordinary village. It looked like a forgotten kingdom, untouched by time, yet alive with elegance. But as he stepped past the gates, he noticed something strange. The streets were filled with people, yet all of them were women. They were beautiful, graceful, and dressed in flowing garments of silk and lace. Some carried baskets of jewels, others walked with trays of golden fruits, and a few were wrapped in cloaks embroidered with diamonds that glittered beneath the lantern light. They moved in silence, their footsteps soft against the marble, their eyes deep with secrets. Chike froze. He waited to see a man among them, any man, but none appeared. It was as if the entire village belonged only to women. He tried to greet one of them, a tall woman with braided hair who passed near him. She looked directly into his eyes, but instead of replying, she simply lowered her gaze and vanished into a grand building with golden doors. Another walked by, her perfume strong and sweet. He called out to her, but she turned her head away, as though he were invisible. Fear crept into Chike's chest. This was not right. No village in Nigeria, no matter how hidden, could survive with only women. Where were the men? Where were the children? Why did no one speak? As he stood there, trembling in awe and unease, the golden lanterns flickered, as though sensing his presence. A cold wind swept through the streets, carrying a faint whisper. It was his name. Chike! He spun around, his eyes wide. The women continued walking gracefully, pretending not to notice. But the whisper came again, stronger this time. Chike! He realized, with a shiver that ran through his bones, that something in this village already knew him. Something powerful, something watching. And in that moment, he understood. Stepping into this place was not an accident. It was a trap. Chaik stood in the marble street, his pulse racing as the golden lanterns swayed above him. He had wandered into places he did not understand before, but never had he seen anything like this. The village was alive, luxurious, radiant, but silent. Everywhere he looked, women moved with a strange grace. They were breathtaking, dressed in flowing gowns of silk, velvet, and embroidered fabric that shimmered under the lantern light. Some carried baskets filled with exotic fruits the color of rubies and emeralds, while others held trays of perfumes that trailed scents of roses and sandalwood into the air. But not one of them spoke. They glanced at him, yes, but it was always the same. A fleeting gaze, soft and quick, followed by an immediate turn of the head as though his existence was forbidden. Chaik felt a chill crawl up his skin. He walked further down the marble road, past fountains carved in the shape of women pouring endless streams of crystal-clear water. He passed golden statues that lined the street, statues of queens, all with sorrowful eyes, all looking upward as if in eternal prayer. Still, there were no men. Not a single one. "Excuse me," he said at last, approaching a young woman who stood at a stall filled with glittering fabrics. Her face was delicate, her eyes shaped like crescent moons, her hair cascading like black silk. She looked at him, lips parting slightly, and for a moment he thought she would answer. But then her expression hardened. She lowered her eyes, turned her back, and walked into the shadows of a towering house with silver windows. "Wait, please," Chaik called, his voice breaking the silence of the street. The sound echoed unnaturally, as though the village itself disapproved of him speaking too loudly. The other women stopped what they were doing. Slowly, they all turned their heads toward him. Dozens of eyes, glowing faintly in the lantern light, stared into his soul. Not one blinked. The silence grew unbearable. Chaik swallowed hard, feeling his throat dry. Their beauty was undeniable, yet their silence made them seem more like ghosts than people. He raised his hands nervously. "I don't mean any harm. I just want to know, where am I?" No one answered. Instead, a ripple passed through the crowd, as though a silent command had been given. The women began to move again, flowing down the street like a tide of silk and perfume. They did not look at him anymore. They simply moved past him. Chaik backed away until he stood beside one of the golden fountains. The water sparkled like diamonds, and he stared at his reflection. His face looked pale, frightened. He tried to laugh at himself, but the sound died in his throat. "What is this place?" he whispered. A soft rustle of footsteps made him turn. Across the fountain, standing half-hidden in the glow of the lanterns, was a woman unlike the others. She wore a long gown the color of midnight, her figure elegant, her presence commanding. Her eyes were not like the others. They were filled with curiosity, even warmth. She watched him quietly, almost as if she had been waiting for him. Chaik's chest tightened. At last, someone who might answer him. But before he could take a step toward her, she raised one finger to her lips. A warning. Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she turned and vanished into the winding streets of Otuoma. Chaik stood frozen, his breath shallow. The silence pressed on him again, thicker than before. He was no longer just an outsider. He was a trespasser in a village where no man was meant to be. And somehow, he could feel it in the stillness. Something was watching from the shadows, waiting for the moment he made the wrong move. The night deepened over Otuoma, yet the golden lanterns refused to dim. They burned brighter, casting the marble streets in a glow that was too perfect, too eternal, as if the village itself rejected darkness. Chaik had tried to follow the mysterious woman in the midnight gown, but the labyrinth of tall houses and winding alleys swallowed her quickly. He wandered aimlessly, the sound of his footsteps echoing far too loudly for his comfort. His stomach tightened with hunger. He had not eaten since leaving Lagos, and the scent of roasted fruits and honeyed bread drifting from the market only worsened the ache. But he dared not approach the stalls again. Every woman there had looked at him like an intruder, some with fear, others with disdain. At last, he reached a grand square at the center of the village. A fountain stood in the middle, carved from crystal stone. The statue was of a woman with her arms raised toward the sky, water spilling endlessly from her open palms. Around the fountain, more women gathered, silent as ever. Some carried pitchers to fill with water, others lingered as though in prayer. Chaik sat on the edge of the fountain, lowering his face into his hands. The exhaustion of Lagos still clung to him, but now it was mixed with something deeper. The dread of being in a place where no man should exist. He muttered under his breath, "Why am I here? What kind of place is this? Leave." The voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like thunder. Chike's head snapped up. For the first time since stepping into Otooma, someone had spoken to him. And it was not just anyone, it was her. The woman in the midnight gown stood across the fountain, her eyes locked onto his. Up close, she was even more striking. Her skin glowed in the lantern light, smooth and golden. Her lips curved slightly, not in a smile but in warning. Her long hair cascaded down her back, dark and lustrous, like a curtain of secrets. Chike rose slowly, his heart pounding. You can speak?" Her eyes darted quickly to the other women, who remained silent, their faces expressionless as they continued filling pitchers. She crossed the fountain swiftly and grabbed his arm, her touch firm but warm. "Not here," she whispered. "If anyone sees me with you, it will be dangerous." "Why?" Chike asked, lowering his voice but refusing to move. "What is this place? Why is everyone?" "Shh." She pressed her fingers against his lips, silencing him. "You should not even be alive right now." Her words sent a shiver through him. He wanted to ask what she meant, but the urgency in her eyes silenced his curiosity. She pulled him toward a narrow alley hidden between two marble houses. Once they were shielded from the women in the square, she released his arm and leaned against the wall, her chest rising and falling with tension. "My name is Amara," she said at last. "Amara," Chike repeated, as though speaking her name might anchor him in this nightmare. "You must leave Otooma before sunrise," Amara warned, her voice low and urgent. "This village is cursed. No man is meant to step here. If the goddess knows you are here, you will not see another day." Chike's mouth went dry. "Cursed? What kind of curse?" Amara's eyes softened for the first time, though sorrow lingered within them. Long ago, this was a place of joy, where men and women lived together in harmony. But betrayal brought the wrath of the goddess Ezelu. Since then, no man who enters Otooma has ever survived. Her words sank into him like stones thrown into deep water. The silence of the village, the absence of men, the haunting whispers of his name. It all began to make sense, though it terrified him more than before. Chike stepped back, shaking his head. "But I didn't come here on purpose. I was only trying to escape Lagos. I don't even know how I found this place." "That does not matter," Amara said firmly. "You are here. And here men die." The golden lanterns flickered again, and Amara's face turned pale. She glanced upward, as if sensing something in the air. Her hand trembled as she touched his shoulder. "You must leave," she repeated, her voice breaking. "Before she finds you." "Who?" Chike whispered. Amara's eyes darkened. "The goddess herself.